prophecy, I don't think should be impressive to anybody. Those are usually the main reasons why people believe, not because some ancient other text aside from the Bible also said that a Jesus figure existed, and that's going to make them believe all the miracles in the Bible even more. Hello. This is not my usual content. I've been doing crochet vlogs every week for quite a while now, over a year, and I'm still trying to grow my following, and I thought I would try something different for a video or 2 or 5. I participated in a debate between 13 atheists and 1 Christian on the Dr Daf Show YouTube channel. So I thought I would dip my toes in the pool of reaction videos, and I thought I would try that for this YouTube video that I was a part of. So I thought I would react to each of the 5 main prompts, and who knows, possibly the final one-on-one conversation as well, even though I was only in prompt number 3. So I'm just trying something new. Let me know if you like it. Let me know if you like this content. I'm not thinking this is necessarily going to be a regular type of video for me, but you see me reacting visually with my face and body language, I think, a lot in this video, even when it's not my prompt, because I'm like right at the center of the front row of the people in the back of all these conversations that are happening. So, let's take a look, shall we, at prompt number 1. Now, all of these prompts were decided upon by the Christian gal. And when I read the prompts, and we had the opportunity to rank the ones that we would most like to do, and I got my first choice, which was cool. They didn't seem like regular conversation prompts. To me, they really seem more like claims from the Christian standpoint. So it's more like, this is a claim that she's making, and then discuss. And I did appreciate the just sort of open format where anybody who wanted to speak could just start speaking. So let's take a look at prompt number 1.
So my first prompt is the historical evidence for Jesus Christ, including his life, crucifixion, and resurrection, is evidence that God exists.
Okay, so right off the bat, I want to say that my understanding from the historians that we have on Jesus and the Bible is that there is generally an agreement that probably there was a Jesus figure, but there is no extra biblical source that points to any of the miracles of Jesus, including the resurrection. But let's hear what these ladies had to say.
Ultimately, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ is a well-known historical attested event, not only from biblical sources, but also extra biblical sources. And I know often a lot of atheists are like, oh, if God's real, why doesn't he prove it? How come he just doesn't come down and show us? But the thing is, he already did. He came through Jesus Christ. And this was actually confirmed by historical evidence outside the Bible. So just wanted to know your thoughts about that.
I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that's true because people have always historically created evidence for what they want to be true so they can control others.
Mm-hmm.
If someone such as Jesus existed, I personally believe he was a revolutionary and perhaps destroyed for his beliefs, and then his words used to create more propaganda. Same as how Martin Luther King is used now to preach peaceful protest when really he was asking us to be more demanding of our rights. But yeah, I don't want to go into monologue, obviously.
Well, that's interesting.
Yes, that's
so
my
you
position.
said you don't believe that happened. Have you actually done the research, or is it just like a blind faith type of thing?
I have. I have studied it as well.
So what have you found based on the historical evidence?
There's not really a lot of historical scientific evidence.
There's a lot. There's Roman historians, there's Jewish historians, there are several historians outside the Bible, those who didn't even like Jesus. They had no skin in the game regarding Jesus. We have Josephus, we have Tacitus, we have Pliny the Younger. These are all people who despise Christians but still recorded the crucifixion of Jesus Christ.
Okay, she says it right here. All these extra biblical sources that she's talking about reference the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Okay, but her prompt specifically includes the resurrection. And I think she's conflating the two. Evidence that a Jesus figure existed and evidence that he was crucified is not evidence of any of the magical stuff that the Bible claims happened.
So, the Bible says, seek me and you'll find me if you search for me with all your heart. And ultimately, I feel like the reason why you don't want to see is because you haven't really looked. You said you found the evidence, but you can't really show it. So I'm not just making up a story. Jesus actually died. He was crucified under Pontius Pilate, the Roman Empire, and this is historical evidence.
I don't disbelieve that Jesus lived or died. Absolutely, and I think that that's probably true. But the resurrection is another thing. There's never been any evidence of a resurrection. And you say that there's evidence that I think he was a prophet, like the Buddha or Muhammad, but I don't believe that he came back. And you've got to figure that at the time when Jesus did live, most of the people were illiterate. They couldn't read, they couldn't write. And if you've ever played telephone when you were a kid, one person starts a story, then it goes to the next, then it goes to the next. And by the end, it changes. And the Bible was not written until 300 some odd years after Jesus died. So who knows what happened to the story?
That's not true.
Okay, I think what she means here is not written. The books of the Bible were not written 300 years after Jesus' death, but it was maybe 350 years after his death that the Bible as a collection of books was finalized, like which writings were going to be included in the final text of the Bible was decided upon that many years after the death of Jesus. So, not everybody in this group is an expert, including myself, and I'm doing a little bit of research myself in doing this response video. But I think we can give a little grace on that. It's still kind of a good point to make that the Bible wasn't even finalized until that many years after Jesus' death, hundreds of years later. And it was decided upon by humans which writings were to be left out and which ones were to be included. And this is the sacred text that, it was decided upon that many years later which accounts we were going to include.
So you said,
as Lioness-Sia, I've researched it, and
let me
it is
correct
absolutely
your facts.
true.
Let me just respond. She said the Bible was written 300 years after Jesus died. That's not true. The Bible has been written 2,000 years, 2,000 years across 40 different authors. You may have meant the Gospels may have been written after Jesus died, but they weren't written 300 years later. They were written about maybe 40 to 60 years after he died. But we also have Old Testament prophecies that came 400 years before Jesus, prophesying his crucifixion, prophesying his resurrection.
Okay, just real quick, prophecy, I don't think should be impressive to anybody, because if somebody wrote down a prophecy, doesn't matter how long ago, that text existed for the people who would want to see the prophecy fulfilled. So all anybody has to do is make it such. Either do something, actually do something to make the prophecy be fulfilled in some way, or write it as such. So to me, prophecy being fulfilled in the Bible, it means nothing.
So just to fact check you on that, even with the game of telephone that you say, we have the Gospels, the 4 eyewitness accounts. They all have the same systematic message. So even amongst the Gospels of these 4 eyewitness accounts, they are the same. And we have manuscripts, thousands of them, that actually show that they're all consistent.
Okay, I promise I will get to the women actually responding to her claim here, but I just really felt compelled to jump in with some of these contradictions that we find and problems in the Gospels themselves. And I found this article that has basically done the legwork for me. This is called Shredding the Gospels, Contradictions, Errors, Mistakes, Fictions. And I put a link to it in the description box because I'm not going to go through the entire thing, just some parts of it. Also, full disclosure, there is a reply article by John McClymont. I'm not sure how to say that. And I'm not even bothering to look at that right now. This article is broken down into three main parts. Number one, the Gospels are not eyewitness accounts. Number two, the Gospels contain numerous and irreconcilable contradictions between themselves. And number three, the Gospels contain numerous factual errors, geographical, historical, legal, and demonstrable fictions. As an introduction to the Gospels not being eyewitness accounts, he says, only two of the canonical Gospels, Matthew and John, are alleged by tradition to have been written by eyewitnesses, but I'm going to address Mark and Luke as well because I feel like wrecking those authorship traditions just to be thorough. First of all, I should say that none of the four canonical Gospels names its own author. None of them claim to be eyewitness accounts or even to have spoken to eyewitnesses of Jesus. All are written in the third person, and none of the authors tell us anything about themselves. All of the traditional ascriptions of authorship come from 2nd century tradition. He goes on at length in this section to explain lots of contradictions between the Gospels about Jesus's life, including the nativity. And I recommend, if you're interested in this, go check it out. At the bottom of this section, he goes on to the passion and resurrection, but first he mentions these other contradictions that I thought were kind of interesting. He says, for instance, remember the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5:12. Luke says it happened on a plain, 6:17. John also omits that whole 40 days in the wilderness bit from the synoptics and just has Jesus start immediately hanging out with the disciples a couple of days after his baptism. There is much that can be made of the seeming contradictions in Jesus' own words and rhetoric, but I'm going to skip past all that and go on to some more interesting contradictions in the Passion and Resurrection narratives. And I think this is what I'd rather show you because this is kind of a main point for this prompt. Last words of Jesus. Now let's examine Jesus' alleged last words on the cross. Matthew 27:46 through 50. From the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness came over all the land. About the 9th hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice. I'm going to leave out the Hebrew here, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those standing there heard this, they said, he's calling Elijah. Immediately one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a stick, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him. And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. Mark says almost the same thing, but renders the psalm quote in Aramaic rather than Hebrew. But in Luke 23:46, and when Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, unto thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. John 19:30, when Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, it is finished, and he bowed his head and gave up the ghost. These are three distinctly contradictory claims for the last words of Jesus on the cross. No one gospel mentions the quotes from the other gospels, and all of them assert their own lines as Jesus' very last words. Irreconcilable. Because this is another glaring contradiction between the Gospels, I wanted to include it, and that's the death of Judas. Before we get to the resurrection narratives, let's look at Judas. I'm going to go outside the Gospels for this one and compare Matthew to Acts, but since Acts was written by Luke, it should still serve to show a contradiction between authors of the Gospels. Matthew 27:1 through 10. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people came to the decision to put Jesus to death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 silver coins to the chief priests and elders. I have sinned, he said, for I have betrayed innocent blood. What is that to us? They replied. That's your responsibility. So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. The chief priests picked up the coins and said, "It is against the law to put this into the treasury, since it is blood money." So they decided to use the money to buy the potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. That is why it has been called the Field of Blood to this day. Then what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. They took the 30 silver coins, the price set on him by the people of Israel, and they used them to buy the potter's field, as the Lord commanded me. Now Acts 1:18 through 19. With the reward he got for his wickedness, Judas bought a field. There he fell headlong. His body burst open, and all his intestines spilled out. Everyone in Jerusalem heard about this, so they called that field in their language Akeldama, that is, field of blood. In Matthew, Judas throws the money back at the priests, then goes and hangs himself. Matthew doesn't say where. Then the priests take the money and buy a field. In Acts, Judas buys a field himself, and then he falls headlong and his guts explode. Irreconcilable. And now we come to resurrection accounts. The resurrection appearance narratives are really a mess of contradictions, so I'll just write a brief synopsis of each account and then pick out the contradictions. And I think this is the most important part in relation to the video and this prompt that we're on, because this is the crux of what we cannot prove with extra biblical sources, or even with biblical sources, I would argue. The fact that the accounts in the Bible itself that point to the resurrection are riddled with inconsistencies and contradictions should be enough to disqualify it from being trustworthy. But let's go over those contradictions as this great article puts together for us. Synopsis of Mark's resurrection. Scene, Sunday morning. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome are walking to the tomb. As they're walking, they're talking and worrying about how they can get somebody to help them move the rock. They get to the tomb and see the rock has been rolled away. They go inside and see an angel sitting in the tomb. The angel shows them that Jesus' body is gone and tells them to inform Cephas and the rest of the disciples that Jesus is risen and that they should all go to Galilee, where they will be able to see him. The women run away from the tomb, but they don't tell anybody because they're terrified. Mark cuts off right there, 16:8, with no further visits to the tomb and no appearance narratives. Synopsis of Matthew's resurrection. Scene, Sunday morning. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary go to the tomb. No mention of Salome this time. Right when they get to the tomb, there's an earthquake. An angel comes down from the sky, rolls away the rock, and sits down on it. This time there are guards at the tomb and they get scared. The angel tells the women pretty much the same thing the other angel said in Mark. He shows them that Jesus is gone and tells them to tell the disciples that Jesus wants to holler at them in Galilee. The women run away, but this time they run bang into Jesus. They freak out some, and Jesus tells them to chill and then tells the women to let the disciples know he would holler at them in Galilee. At this point, there's an interjection in which the guards run to the priests and tell them what they saw, so then the priests bribe the guards to say that the disciples stole Jesus' body. Back to the disciples, the 11 of them go to a mountain in Galilee, and Jesus appears. They give Jesus mad props, but some are still doubtful. Jesus tells them to go out and preach the message and baptize people, and that he will always be with them. And that's it for Matthew. Synopsis of Luke's resurrection. Scene, Sunday morning. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, Joanna, and the rest of the women go to the tomb. As in Mark, they find the stone already rolled away. They peep inside the tomb. What? No Jesus. As they're standing there trying to figure out what's going on, all of a sudden 2 angels appear out of thin air. The women freak. The angels tell them to chill and tell them that Jesus has risen. The women run to tell the disciples, but Luke's angels do not explicitly instruct them to do so this time. The disciples don't believe them, but then Peter jumps up and runs to the tomb. He peeps in and sees that Jesus is gone. He goes home, marveling. Cut to 2 of them, one named Cleopas, the other unnamed, walking to Emmaus. They meet Jesus, but they don't recognize him. They tell him all about Jesus and the women and the empty tomb. Jesus tells them how dumb they are for not knowing the prophecies, which didn't actually exist, but that's another can of worms. They stop to have some grub, and when they break bread, they recognize Jesus. Then he vanishes. Cleopas and the other dude run back to Jerusalem and find the rest of the disciples. The rest of the disciples tell them that Jesus had risen and appeared to Simon, who may or may not be the Peter who Luke says had seen the empty tomb, but does not say had seen the risen Jesus. I mention this because Luke actually uses the name Peter in the former case and Simon in the latter, so this may indicate two different people. Cleopas and the other dudes start telling the disciples about seeing Jesus on the road to Emmaus, and then Jesus suddenly appears while they're talking. Please note that they are still in Jerusalem and have not yet gone to Galilee. They freak. Jesus tells them to chill, and he shows them all the rad holes in his hands and feet. Then Jesus asks them if they have had anything to eat. I guess he hadn't eaten in 3 days. They give him some fish, and he eats it. Then he preaches at them for a while before leading them to Bethany, where he ascends into the sky. The disciples go happily back to Jerusalem, and that's the end for Luke. Synopsis of John's resurrection. Scene, Sunday morning. Mary Magdalene, alone, goes to the tomb. The stone has already been rolled away. She runs and finds Simon Peter along with the beloved disciple, who will henceforth be referred to as BD. Mary Magdalene tells them that the body has been taken. Peter and BD go running to the tomb. BD outruns Peter and gets there first and sees some strips of burial linens lying outside the tomb. Peter gets there and goes inside the tomb. Peter sees that Jesus is gone. BD then goes in and sees it too. Peter and BD go back home. Mary Magdalene is left crying outside the tomb. She peeps inside the tomb and sees 2 angels. Then Jesus comes up behind her and she sees him, but doesn't recognize him. She thinks he's the gardener and asks him if he moved the body and could he tell her where it was. Then Jesus says her name, Mary, and she recognizes him. He tells her not to touch him, but to go tell the disciples about him. She goes and finds the disciples and tells them. John doesn't say where they are. Later that night, Jesus appears to the disciples and shows them all his rad wounds. Then he breathes on them and says he's giving them some Holy Spirit and tells them that he's giving them the power to forgive sins. Then we get the doubting Thomas story. Thomas doubts. Thomas sticks fingers in rad nail holes. Thomas believes. Then Jesus says that people who believe without proof are more blessed than those annoying skeptics. John really ends there. There's another amended chapter which I won't bring into the contradictions argument, but just to be thorough, the amended chapter tells a weird story about Jesus appearing to the disciples in Galilee and helping them catch some fish. Then he keeps asking Peter if he loves him and gives him his evangelical marching order and hints that he's going to come to a rough end. Then Peter sees the BD following them and asks Jesus about him. Jesus tells Peter it's not his business if Jesus wants BD to hang around until he returns. Then the author says there was a rumor that the BD wasn't supposed to die before Jesus came back, but Jesus didn't actually say that. He just said, "What business is it of yours if I do want him to stay?" End of amended John. I like how this author recaps the contradictions here. So, how many women went to the tomb? Was it Mary Magdalene by herself? Was she with the other Mary? The other Mary and Salome? The other Mary and Joanna and the, quote, rest of the women? Was the stone already rolled away when they got there, or did they see an angel come down and do it? How many angels were there? 1 or 2? Where were they? Were they in the tomb or sitting on the stone? Or did they appear out of thin air? Or did they descend from the sky? Who was the first person to see Jesus? Was it Mary Magdalene? If so, when did she see him? Did she crash into Jesus on her way to tell the disciples? Or did he come up behind her after she had returned to the tomb and was peeping in at the angels? Where and when did Jesus appear to the disciples? Was it in Jerusalem? Or was it Galilee? I would challenge anyone to resolve these stories without leaving anything out. I say they are irreconcilable. Okay, so that was all in response to Johanna basically saying that the Gospels all consistently say the same thing. I don't remember her exact wording, but something like that. And clearly they don't. They are contradictory to the point that I don't think we should take it as evidence that these were eyewitness accounts of the same event.
I do believe there is some documentation that this person called Jesus existed. I do believe there's documentation, not extensive, but some that does document the crucifixion. My hypothesis is that he was the Martin Luther King, the Mahatma Gandhi, the Bernie Sanders of his day. He was the person who was rebelling against the theocracy that existed with the Sadducees and Pharisees in line with the banksters, the bankers, and the Roman Empire, the corporate and the merger of state and government. And he preached a gospel of social justice and doing unto others and equality. I do not deny any of that, because that is true. I really believe that that there was a Jesus, and he served a very important purpose. But on the other hand, he got taken over by Paul, who I had the idea.
Let me respond back to your one claim.
Okay.
Okay, by the way, this is my friend Carol. I know her personally through the atheist group in Santa Clarita. I don't live there anymore, but I'm still affiliated with that group. Anyway, she was really nice to put me up for the night for coming down for this filming, and she and I rode down together. And anyway, regardless, I agree with her. It seems like Jesus was definitely anti-establishment and radically nonviolent. So I would definitely put him amongst the likes of Gandhi and Bernie. Yeah, I like that. And since Johanna interrupted, let's see what Johanna had to say.
Go ahead.
So you said that he was like the Martin Luther King of the time. Jesus came as a suffering servant. The Jewish people, they thought that he would come to rise as king so that he can overthrow the Roman Empire. But even when it comes to his crucifixion, low-key, the gospel is one of the most embarrassing stories. If they're going to think of the gospel, they're not going to say that their king was crucified on the cross. Crucifixion was so embarrassing. It was for the lowest of the low. Even Roman citizens were not even allowed to be crucified because it was so desecrating. Not only that, when they preached the gospel, they had a woman that of all people, a woman go to preach the gospel message because all the disciples, the men disciples head. How embarrassing is that? Not only that, I mean, you just...
Wait, are you saying it's embarrassing because a woman is preaching?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying in that time, okay, I'm pro-woman, okay, I'm a woman myself, but I'm saying during that time, like, and then not only that, after the disciples preach the gospel, they're getting crucified and they're getting murdered and martyred for this story. So I don't understand how that's like this manifesto Martin Luther King Jr. or by Bernie Sanders, because it was a horrific message that ultimately ended in death for everybody. But it preached one central message that Christ is king and he died, rose, and is going to come back so that we can ultimately be saved.
I guess my response to all that is that if the suffering servant dying this way was going to be such an embarrassment and hard to prove the facts of this religion, the facts of this miraculous stuff, if it was going to be so hard to prove that to people because it was such an embarrassment how it all went down, then why would God choose to make it happen that way? Isn't this the thing that he wants everybody to know about and believe in? I guess that's all I've got.
I would even like to, okay, that's your belief.
It's the truth, babes. It's all historical.
That's your belief.
It's historical.
Because if we're talking about truth, there's lots of truth
History
out
books.
there.
I didn't make it up.
You know, we don't even, this is like a minute belief.
It's not.
in the vast existence of the universe.
It's minute, but we have AD and BC that documents our entire date system.
Yes, Lioness-Sia brings up a great point. This is a minute belief. Out of all the beliefs in the world that have ever existed in the timeline of mankind, this is one of a lot. And the fact that we figured out our dating system around Jesus, that doesn't prove anything about the truth of the claim.
And yes, you mentioned a lot of people that have documented this work. And I would like to say, a lot of the people that you did mention were ones of the perpetrator of the implementation of this religion.
I just wanted to throw it in there. I think she means perpetuating. They were perpetuating the religion. They were working to spread it, make it believed by more and more people.
They were the ones that were actually putting this religion into faith, into consensus across the world.
What do you mean?
If you say the Roman Empire,
Yeah.
the Roman Empire was one who had the largest army, was one of the first to implement Christianity as a national rule in Rome. Yes. And then obviously with colonization and with the creation of the Vatican, which is the church, and the Vatican blessed kings and queens of different cultures to then go colonize other nations and implement religion, right?
Yeah, it's not religion for us, though. It's relationship. It's spreading the message and the gospel of Jesus Christ. So yes, there have been like people who have set up rules in religion to dominate people. We've had the colonizers come to Africa and like enslave Africans in the name of religion, and that's demonic. And I completely denounce that. That's horrific. So yeah,
That was just a segue for right now. We
Okay.
can come back to that. But
Sure.
the point I was really trying to make is even like, yeah, that's your belief. But let's not forget as well that even the story of the birth of Jesus is a story that has appeared across lots of different cultures. It's not unique
the
to the
virgin
Christian.
birth is not unique.
It's not.
Can you tell me where else?
A lot
it's
of the
been?
Bible stories are taken from different cultures.
Do you have any evidence to show any other types of virgin births that happened?
Oh, there is a whole Wikipedia page devoted just to miraculous births. I'm putting the link to this in the description box if you want to look through it. But here is the introduction. Miraculous births are a common theme in mythological, religious, and legendary narratives and traditions. They often include conceptions by miraculous circumstances and features such as intervention by a deity, supernatural elements, astronomical signs, hardship, or, in the case of some mythologies, complex plots related to creation. I'm not even going to get into it, but as you can see, there are examples in ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, Judaism, Zoroaster, Greco-Roman and Hellenistic literature, Hinduism, Buddhism, China, Christianity, Islam, and other traditions. Okay, so my dad actually just explained this to me, and I thought I would pop this in. As you can see, costume change for just this little segment. Even within Christianity, people disagree about whether Mary was a virgin when she had Jesus, because originally in the original text, the word that was used directly translated to young woman or unmarried young woman, and in translation into English, that became virgin. So originally it wasn't written with the context, the understanding of what we understand virgin to mean. That is not the word that was used originally. So originally it was just written that Jesus would be born, or the Messiah would be born of a young woman, a young unmarried woman. And I will just throw it out there that there are a lot of other stories in mythology that also mirror the rest of Jesus's life, the death, crucifixion, and resurrection as well. Those have been mirrored across other mythologies. If you're interested, I'll link to this article in the description box, and it goes over 6 pre-Christian mythologies of resurrection stories.
I mean, I think I would like to answer your prompt first. I don't believe that just because Jesus existed, that it automatically means that your version of God exists. Humanity is 300,000 years old. This religion and Jesus died 2,000 years ago. So it's hard for me to believe that somebody who died or existed 2,000 years ago in the 300,000 year history of humanity, that is the only evidence that we have that a God exists. Okay. My ancestors in the Caribbean and in Africa believed in lots of things, but mostly they believed in what they could see. They believed in taking care of the earth. They believed in taking care of animals, being stewards of their environment. That was God to them. And I would never deny them that because that's where I come from, right? But my personal stance on a God existing is also rooted in my reality. I've never had a God speak to me personally. I was raised Christian because of colonization. My ancestors were forced to convert to Christianity. They were forced to learn how to read and write because they were considered illiterate. And I have a huge problem with Christians trying to espouse that the fact that Jesus's life was recorded when so many of our ancestors didn't have the ability to read or write in the same way that Abrahamic religions did, that means that their experiences were invalid and that the things that they believed in are invalid. Okay. So for me, when you say, well, this is recorded history, for me, that sounds really disrespectful because so much of my ancestry were considered illiterate and were considered animals because they didn't have the same ability to read and write in the same way that the people who wrote the Bible did.
I really love how eloquently she made this point. My mind hadn't even gone there, and so I was really, really pleased to hear this point coming from her. This idea that because the people were able to record this mythology, this story, doesn't mean that it has any more truth to it than years and years of beliefs and legends being passed on in other ways.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So you mentioned about the time aspect, like the world has been here for 300,000 years. Well, we can speculate. I'm not even sure, but whether or not that happened or not.
There is evidence that humanity has existed for
300,000 years. For the sake
I mean,
of,
you're talking about recorded history, so I'm just putting the recorded history back to you.
Let me answer. Let's say 300,000 years. Okay. Jesus is eternal. So whether it's 300 years ago or not, he existed before the world existed.
It's kind of a perfect point to bring up in this topic where we're talking about historical evidence and recorded history. We have what's called the fossil record. That is recorded history right there. So yes, humans have existed here for about 300,000 years. And according to a lot of conservative fundamentalist Christians, that goes right against the Bible. So how about that? And Johanna's response of whether it's 300 years or 300,000 years, Jesus is eternal, is, first of all, it just dismisses the evidence that we have of the fossil record. But also it doesn't address the issue at all. It's just making the claim of Jesus being eternal. There's no evidence of that. She still hasn't produced any evidence of that.
And is historical evidence the only way to prove that Jesus is God? No, but that's just for the sake of the prompt. Not only that, you can't say that people who are illiterate can't preserve a message. We have Muhammad who didn't read or write, but a whole Quran was produced. Not only that, the true and living God, if he can stand the test of time, he's going to allow some sort of evidence to be manifested or shown. So I respect that. And for the sake of this argument, it's about historical evidence, which is what we're relying on. So
Right, and
yeah.
the historical evidence has been used to persecute and
It
subjugate
absolutely has.
my ancestors.
Yes, I have, which I presented that as well. Just because it happened didn't mean it's actually right. It actually goes against the Bible. But again, for the sake of the prompt, I'm showing you that because of historical evidence, Jesus Christ is God. And using the Bible is what we are able to see. We are able to see Old Testament prophecies. We have over 300 Old Testament prophecies that have come to pass.
Okay, well, I've already addressed Old Testament prophecies and why that doesn't make any sense to let that dictate your belief in something. Because, and I'll just reiterate, anybody can make a prophecy come true. You can do things to make it seem like it's a fulfillment of a prophecy that's previously written. They had access to those prophecies that were previously written. But aside from that, I'd just be curious to know why she chose this prompt. Does she believe that God is real and Jesus is eternal because of these few obscure mentions that there was a Jesus figure outside of the Bible? And there are mentions by these few obscure other sources that this Jesus figure has some stories around him, attributing, sorcery to him. Is that why she believes? I highly doubt it. And if that's not a reason for her belief, why does she think that this would be convincing to other people? I think as a Christian, if you're trying to convince other people, you look for all the ways that you possibly can. And I don't fault her for that. I did the same thing when I was a Christian. But when it comes down to it, and the reason I didn't do it earlier was because I didn't really investigate exactly why I believed what I believed. I didn't really know why I believed what I believed until I investigated it. But usually Christians, I think, believe because they either were indoctrinated into it as a child, or they've gone through something as an adult and they needed that kind of community and that kind of feeling of belonging and the sense that God could wash away their sins if they felt like they had done something really wrong in their life, and then they feel like they are fresh to live a new life. And it gives them a sense that they are now on the right track. They have redemption in their life. And I think that those are usually the main reasons why people believe, not because some ancient other text aside from the Bible also said that a Jesus figure existed, and that's going to make them believe all the miracles in the Bible even more.
We have the documentation of his crucifixion. We also have the empty tomb. No one can explain where his body went. Can you explain?
Well, I
since
can
you're
explain
laughing?
that.
Yeah, for sure.
Even if there is solid, compelling evidence for us to believe that an empty tomb was found after Jesus's burial, that is only evidence for an empty tomb. That is not evidence for why it's empty. You would need something else to prove the why.
You said so many things that I'd love to respond to, but we're limited for time right now. One of the other things is the Quran. You mentioned the Quran. I would like to remind you that the Quran and the Bible came from the same place.
No, they did not.
Yes,
They
that's
absolutely
the
did
trail
not.
of the
Allah
Abrahamic.
and our true God are not the same, and we completely disagree with that.
And that's fine.
Okay, I do think that Johanna does a lot of responding without actually listening to what we're saying, because what Lioness-Sia said was that the Quran and the Bible come from the same place. They come from the same geographical region, the Middle East, and they share a lot of the same figures, characters, people, and And Johanna's response was, that's not true. The two gods are different. They are not the same. She didn't claim that they're the same. So I feel like she doesn't listen to the nuance of what we're saying, the specifics of what we're actually saying, and she just applies a straw man fallacy in like arguing against something that we didn't actually say.
I'm telling you,
that's
you haven't even read the Bible or the Quran. I've studied both.
I will-
I'm telling you. I mean,
Wait, that's a pretty bold statement.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
my
an
apologies.
assumption
If
that
I-
a lot of
okay,
us
if
weren't
I
raised
assumed
Christian
my-
and haven't
okay.
gone to Bible
If I
study.
assume, my apologies.
We all had a big reaction to that, as you could see. I want to give Johanna a little bit of grace. I think what she did was an incredibly difficult thing. And especially for somebody who I think hasn't been a Christian for all that long. I looked at her Instagram and I think she's only been a Christian for a few years. It is a common thing that people think that atheist means that we're just uninformed about it, but it is very wrong. I think most atheists have done a lot of thinking about it. We were raised and brought up in a society that is highly Christian, and at least in the United States, and to maintain that we don't believe in a God enough to actually call ourselves atheists means we've probably put a lot of thought into it, and we've probably looked a lot into it, researched it, read the Bible. A lot of us were raised Christian. A lot of us eventually questioned and doubted and reevaluated our beliefs and why we believed the way we did, and realized that there really wasn't a good reason. That's me. I've already explained that. And I explain that later in part 3, which is coming. But yeah, it's insulting to assume that somebody, just to assume something like that about somebody outright. And so that's why we all had a big reaction. I think we were just surprised that she would make that assertion. But like I said, let's give Johanna grace. She did a really incredibly hard thing, and she put herself out there. I put myself out there. This was my first time doing anything like this, which you haven't even seen me do it yet, unless you've watched the original video, which I encourage you to do. Go watch the original Dr. Daf video in its entirety. Usually, if we come to the realization that we are atheist and we classify ourselves as such, we've done a lot of thinking and researching on the topic.
Have you read the Bible and the Quran?
I was raised both Muslim and Christian.
Okay, my apologies for assuming
Africa.
that. Okay, so why do you say that the Bible and the Quran came from the same person?
Because it did.
How so?
Abrahamic religions have a trail of Judaism and Christianity and Islam, and it's from the Tanakh that the Torah was, which is the laws that the Bible or the Quran are basically created through. And the Quran is supposed to be the more precise version of it. But Christianity was created, yes, thousands of years after Jesus' demise by numerous of scribes and, through a period of time. And so a lot of different people have implemented their own versions of what they want people to believe, of what they want people like you, vulnerable people,
I'm
that
not
are
vulnerable.
looking
I
for...
am completely strengthened by the Jesus Christ. I'm not.
And
vulnerable
exactly,
anyway. So
because...
please don't put that on me, because I am not. I'm victorious through Jesus Christ.
Ashe. And I love that for you.
Yeah.
So I completely understand where she's coming from when she calls her vulnerable. She's talking about people creating religions that specifically want to reach vulnerable people like Johanna. And I think Johanna immediately got defensive about that. But if we go back to what Johanna was initially saying about why she came to Jesus, she came because she felt horrible after having her abortions. She felt like she had sinned and she needed salvation. She needed that forgiveness from the Jesus figure story that that she can be wiped clean. And to me, she's describing a very vulnerable state that she was in. But she just immediately gets defensive. She wasn't being called vulnerable now. Lioness-Sia was referring to the state a person is in when they are going to accept a religion. And being in a vulnerable state makes you more likely to accept the religion because you need that assurance that you're an okay person, or that you are a saved person, that you are cared for by God. So she wasn't telling her that she's vulnerable now. She's telling her that she was in a vulnerable state. And if you think about it, the way that Johanna responded, she said, "I am strengthened through Jesus," or something like that, which is kind of admitting the point that Lioness-Sia was making, that she is not vulnerable now because now she has her strength through Jesus. And, for me, thinking about all of this, it is kind of sad that some people need to have that. I wouldn't want to take it away. If they couldn't give themselves the strength that they need in this life, then I wouldn't want to take away their belief in something that makes them feel stronger and makes them feel less vulnerable.
So let me respond to your prompt. So you said that the Quran and the Bible are the same.
That's not what she said.
Completely wrong. Muhammad is a false prophet. He came to completely turn people away from Jesus. So even the Quran says that the Bible, just one second, the Quran says that Allah confirms the Torah and the Gospel, but they are also completely a mismatch. So for example, the Quran says that it was only made to appear that Jesus was crucified, but that is contrary to the Bible. So we also hear that Muhammad is the last and final prophet, but Jesus said it is finished. So although it kind of stems from it, it's not the same.
Yeah, except the thing that she actually said was they came from the same place. So if I were to expand upon like maybe what she meant by that, and the implications of that, it's that you have some of the same recurring characters in both books, and they're totally different in a lot of ways. One came after, of course, but the fact that we have two books that are supposedly eyewitness accounts, supposedly, of some of the same events happening, some of the same people in there, but they are different, that should make both of them seem less reliable. And just stating that yours is the true one, she's not producing any evidence. Once again, she's not producing anything that should make us that makes it clear that this one is more believable than that one. The fact that they both came from the same area and they supposedly depict real events, some of them covering the same people and events, but depicting them differently. Even within the Bible, as I already showed you, the same event is depicted different ways. It makes it so hard to take it as trustworthy. And I would posit that you shouldn't.
That is so typical, I'm sorry, of Christian dogma, that you would deny the existence of the right to somebody else to believe in their own prophet.
I didn't deny anyone.
And yes, you said, Muhammad was a false prophet.
He was a false prophet. He existed.
In your mind.
No, according
but to many
the Bible.
people, no.
Just to be fair, I want to defend Johanna for a second. She didn't say that other people don't have the right to believe in another God.
Okay.
I was raised as an atheist, and my core belief is in science and provable fact. And a lot of the things that you take on faith are completely disproven by scientific fact. And you say there's evidence of, an empty tomb is evidence of nothing.
Bullseye. Yes, you heard me make that statement already earlier. An empty tomb is evidence of nothing. Just as my dreams aren't evidence that the BFG visited me in the middle of the night. If you know, you know.
So where's the body?
maybe
They
somebody
ate
wanted.
him.
Yeah, maybe somebody wanted the
They
robe.
used
Or
to eat
ju-
people to gain their
Yikes.
powers. And if
Okay,
they
so
believed
what about
Jesus
it
was
was
powerful,
heavily
they probably
guarded?
ate
So
him.
how did they get in there and eat Jesus? You don't know? Just an assumption?
Okay, the reason people are putting forth other possible explanations for an empty tomb is just to point out the fact that there are multiple possible explanations for something like an empty tomb. It could be aliens abducting his body to do experiments. But the thing is, we don't go around molding our lives to match up with a belief of aliens abducting Jesus's body or people eating Jesus's body, and then pushing those beliefs on other people and limiting other people's rights around the world based on those beliefs. So I find it fascinating that Johanna wants us to prove some other reason that we're positing as another possible explanation. We're not trying to get her to believe another possible explanation. I think that they're just throwing out other possibilities to point out the fact that an empty tomb is only evidence for an empty tomb. You need to have positive evidence for whatever explanation you're convinced of if you're going to try to convince other people.
Yeah?
We get up to the fact that there was a Jesus, and there was, seems to have been documented out from outside sources. You base your opinions only on one document, and you use the other things that you read to justify what you have been taught over and over and over again. There's a huge leap between crucifixion and this fantasy of Jesus flying up, the resurrection, the going up into the sky, and the coming back, all the fantasy. But those things, if you really study, Mesopotamia had many, many incidences of belief of the virgin birth, of the prophet that was killed. There's many, many things that are documented all over, but your sole belief rests in this one document that you take as absolute truth.
Yeah,
And that's
I
not
hear
true. You have to study and always leave room that there are other ways to look at things.
Yeah, totally. Just to correct you on that, you said I'm looking at one document. The whole prompt is that there are historical evidence. As I mentioned, that there's Josephus, there's Tychicus, there's Pilate,
But resurrection and all of the fantasy that you have.
Yeah,
about
it's not fantasy, it's
that stuff is
miraculous.
fantasy.
And I'm saying, like, if you think it's fantasy, then explain the empty tomb. Where did the body go?
I will agree with Carol on this. I think she basically hits the nail on the head. I do think that Christians believe not because of the Bible, but they believe for other reasons that I've already kind of outlined here. They need that community. They need that forgiveness in their life. They were just brought up in it, and that's all they know, and they've been taught it from a very young age. All these reasons that makes them just accept it at face value, and they're told that the book is real, that the book is true, and so they cling to the scripture, and exactly like Carol was explaining, anything else that points to in historical documentation that points to anything at all in the Bible, even something as simple as a person having lived and existed, and like say it's documented that Jesus was real, a real person, and there are stories told about him that he did crazy things, right? That is not evidence that there was a Jesus doing miraculous things, things that are not possible for other people to do. But anything that is evidence of one non-miraculous thing seems to be, in a roundabout way, for somebody who already believes, it helps to bolster and sustain that belief when they're looking for reasons to explain their belief. But at the core of it, I do not think that that is a reason that they believe. It's just sort of like a post hoc justification for their belief. The fact that we cannot explain something, and this applies to anything across the board. If we can't explain something, that's okay, and that's all that it means. It just means that we can't explain something. If we can't explain something, it doesn't make sense to then go, well, I'm going to make this thing up to explain it without evidence. Science looks at things that aren't explained, and it makes guesses as to what it could be, but then it tests those guesses, and it finds out whether those guesses were correct or not. So doubting is the way that we can find out whether something is true or not. We take guesses, we question, and then we test. So the scientific method is the right way to go about finding out whether something is true or finding out the truth of whatever we're talking about.
No.
Yeah, so you have to
If
even
there was
Definitely
an
think
empty
they
tomb.
ate him. You still have a ritual of eating the body and blood of
so
Christ.
that's what I'm saying.
They literally ate people
so I'm
back then. They ate
okay,
black people for
right,
one
so
to
I'm
gain our
saying-
powers.
Yeah, so
So
I'm
if they
saying
thought
the,
Jesus
the
was
tomb
powerful,
was heavily guarded. So who's eating it? Who ate it? Where were the bones? Did they eat the bones too? They fed them pigs? Like, what's going on? Okay.
So I guess in conclusion, I feel like just as much as Johanna is not feeling compelled by the idea that people ate Jesus's body, we are not compelled by her explanation. And, I know it's not just her explanation. This is, a whole religion. But I wish more Christians would realize that if I were to go around claiming that people ate Jesus's body, people would rightly tell me I don't have the evidence for it. But it sounds just as likely, or actually it sounds more likely than something that breaks the laws of physics as we know them. So I guess with that, this is gonna wrap up my video here, and I hope you will let me know in the comments if you liked it. If you have hate comments for me, that's fine. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I'm pretty solid in my beliefs, but I would ask you to keep it civil in the comment section, because the world is better if we're just nice to each other, and we'll listen to each other better if we're kind. And because I'm a full-time crochet artist and I'm trying to make a living out of this and trying to diversify by having a YouTube channel, I thought I'd show off this cute top that I'm wearing that I made. I have another one just like it in my shop. I would love it if you wanted to go check out my shop. If you appreciate handmade things, I will put the link to my shop in the description box. Also, if you enjoy watching people's creative process, regardless of what that is, I do. I enjoy watching people do pottery, all sorts of crafting or building stuff that I don't do. I enjoy watching people's creative process. If you enjoy that kind of thing, I would really love it if you wanted to check out my crochet vlog. I've been vlogging every single week for over a year, and I have pretty good number of vlogs lined up. They're all numbered, so you can watch them right from the beginning if you want. I release one of those every Tuesday. I'm gonna see if I'm up to releasing another part for this in this series next Saturday. I'm not sure yet. Oh, we'll see. This has been a lot of work, more than I expected. So the important thing is hit subscribe and comment and share. Thanks. Bye.